Hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about spiritual magic, the law of attraction, the mind, body, spirit connection, and how to best enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. I knew I should have memorized that this week. My name is Collin.
I love that voice. You go, baby. That's like one of your best intros.
I feel like if I don't memorize that, I'm going to stumble. I had a little stumble. It's fine. We just rolled it.
Darling.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, we very much appreciate it. Thank you so much if you're watching us on YouTube instead. If you would like to subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to our channel on YouTube, we would love that. If you would like to like this video on YouTube, we would really appreciate that. If you enjoyed it, we would really appreciate it if you could demonstrate that by liking it. And if you would like to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, we would really appreciate that as well. It helps us out here a lot. I have a correction to make, and then we'll get into the topic for this week. We talk about a different topic every week here on Co-Creation Station. I just want to say this for the record. Last week we were talking about, in the last episode, we were talking about how we can use comedy to laugh and to get into a happy state, and which will put us in a positive vibration, which will help us allow more great stuff to flow into our life because of how the law of attraction works. And I talked about how I like to watch Frank Caliendo, the comics rendition as Morgan Freeman of Allen Iverson's famous practice rant. And what I said was, I'm a Virgo, by the way. Details are very important to me. What I said
really helps us in this doing podcast.
That's true.
Thank you.
It's always a yin yang. It's always an upside and a downside. But I mistakenly said, because I had just forgotten, that the reason for Allen Iverson's rant was that a teammate of his had some sort of problem in practice, and a reporter asked him if the mistake that his teammate made in practice would hurt their playoff chances or something like that. I got that completely wrong. I remembered that completely wrong. If there's anybody here who actually knows what the practice rant is, which I doubt, you already knew this, but actually what had happened is there was a rumor going around Philadelphia at that time that he was missing a lot of practices, and that meant he was not serious about basketball, and that there was some sort of friction between him and his coach at the time, Larry Brown, who was very meticulous and very adamant that everybody attend practice, every time regularly and be on time and all that sort of stuff. And so there was all this rumor circulating in the press about that. And he was actually talking for a good 15 minutes, not about practice before that, trying to talk about that situation, the fact that there are rumors flying around that he's going to be traded, that his coach doesn't really like him that much. And he was talking about how he was upset about that. And then he got into the practice rant because a reporter did ask him, does this have anything to do with your not showing up to practice or whatever? So he was actually talking about himself, not a teammate. He was actually talking about the fact that he had not attended one or more practices, and but he was really concerned that this had been blown out of proportion, and there were all these rumors going around about him over something he didn't feel like was very important. Like, he felt like what was important was the results in the game, where he was amazing and one of the greatest NBA players of all time. So I just had to get that out of the way. So I don't want to misrepresent anybody here on the podcast, accidentally or otherwise. But let's get into the topic, Stephanie. So today we're going to talk about happy childhood memories.
What did you love doing as a child?
Yeah.
So what did you love doing as a child? Because I want to hear about yours. I know some, and I don't know that I've shared all mine with you. And then just fun childhood memories.
Yeah, and I do want to give a word of explanation of like what we were talking about in our friend time, which I haven't received any emails. What's we had a contest going. What's the contest?
Yeah, we do. I have it in my file.
Oh, it's like somebody. No, it's like submit your best. Tell me something good story, right?
I don't know. I'm not even going to try.
An experience or a memory that you go back to.
Blah 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 blah. La 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 la. Da da da. It's not that. Blah 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 blah. Oh, here it is. Winner a contest. Winner joins us for.
Oh, you wrote it down. That's so good.
Funniest story.
Funniest story.
So tell us a
from your
story.
life.
Yeah. And whichever one, I think we were going to pick 3 or something, and whichever one,
Yeah.
maybe tell it here. I don't
That's
remember
right.
exactly. And then whichever one makes us both laugh the most, that person is going to get to join us on friend time, which is we
Yes,
usually
the
do like a
private friend
half hour.
time
Yeah.
on Zoom.
And then they will get
It's not
to
recorded.
and then also join us for some of the
For the intro to the podcast that week.
Yeah.
All right. So submit your funny stories to our email address, which is down in the comments on YouTube, and I'll try to pull it up later. But yeah. So, I think some people might be thinking, the title. By the way, this is episode 18 of the first season.
Woo!
We only have 5 episodes left of season 1. It's amazing.
We had a little dance party in our friend time today.
We did.
To celebrate.
If the person who wins the contest wants to have a dance party with us in the friend time, I think that should also be allowed. I also realized this week, I'm sorry, I'm doing that thing that I hate on podcasts where people don't talk about the topic. I'm doing it right now. But I just realized Joe Rogan on his podcast, he, instead of having a mic that's like down like this, on a stand, he has one that's like on an arm. And I realized why he does that, because when I'm putting together the promo for the podcast every week, I realize as I'm watching myself, I'm like going, like I'm constantly looking down at the mic and being like, well, if I had it up like this with an arm, I wouldn't have to do that. Anyway.
Okay. Well, your next fun purchase.
but
let's go. Okay. So.
The reason we want to talk about childhood memories and share some of ours, happy childhood memories, is that one of the topics we talk about a lot here is how do we get our mind, body, spirit into a positive vibration? How do we get it into
feeling better?
A vibration where we can attract more of what we want into our life. But also, there's sort of 2 parts to it. One of it is just if you do some of the things we talk about, like watch some comedy, like we talked about last episode, or think of a happy childhood memory, like we're going to talk about this episode, that automatically puts your brain in a place where it starts focusing on those images or experiences or whatever, and you start feeling the emotion of joy. You start feeling the emotion of happiness. Yeah. So that's a win. Like any handful of seconds that we feel joy on this planet, it's like, congrats,
and that's why we want everything.
Done the point of life,
because we want to feel better. So if we can to show ourselves we can feel better now, it's a win-win.
Right. But also, in terms of the art of allowing, which is what you primarily focus on in your coaching, Stephanie, and what you taught me very well, and Abraham Hicks talks about as well, is that when we're feeling joy, when we're feeling happiness, our vibration is open and is attracting more positive stuff into our life. So more money, more happy experiences, more joy, more love,
everything. And this is something that we don't talk about a lot, just in the general law of attraction, art of allowing world, but we're also like increasing our health.
Yes.
Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Like it impacts, anytime we feel better, it impacts every part of our beingness, our cells.
Yeah.
So it's a win across the board.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was looking at, I do want to share our memories, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I was looking over a lot of the episodes this past week just to see what the topics were and things. Yeah. And, we had our friend Alice on to talk about the Alexander technique and sort of getting your body to be in positions that it wouldn't be naturally without all the stresses of life. Yeah. And we had Dr. Chris talk about having your spine in alignment and how the neural network of the body then can be free to do everything that it's going to do. And then we had Samantha, the homeopath, on a couple weeks ago, where she talked about using healing methods that like kind of are in alignment with how our bodies naturally work and how the natural world can work with our body in a positive way. And I think all of those things are connected for me, in the sense that's why I added the mind, body, spirit connection into our description there this week, because I feel like, the podcast essentially is about co-creating, which is working together with other people or the universe or God or whatever you call it, and manifesting like things that you really love into your life, whatever that means. But but there's all sorts of different routes to get there, and they are all sort of interconnected. Like the more healthy you are, the higher your vibration is going to be. The more mentally
better I'll
clear you
feel,
are,
right?
yeah, the more mentally clear you are, the more you're
Okay,
going to
so
attract good
I'm
stuff.
gonna derail you right now,
Yes.
boyfriend.
All right. Let's get into it.
So
Yeah.
I, in our friend time, I thought of something that I hadn't even thought about this until that moment, and I haven't thought about it in years. Something that I used to do with my stepsisters, is we lived. So I grew up in San Diego. In my childhood home was in College Grove, and so our home backed up against a hillside, and it was probably like sandstone or something, and because of the water erosion, there were these little protrusions of soil, and so we could climb up the hillside and sit on them like they were a horse and look above our home and out into the street, our name, and we would sit on them and like pretend like we were galloping. And
That's awesome.
and I love horses. Like I had a horse growing up, and so I just and if someone had put in a garden hose into the hillside so we could actually climb up. There was some part of it still left.
Wow.
So we could actually use it to climb up to the hillside, because it wasn't that easy to get up there. But I hadn't thought about that until in our friend time we were talking about, you had told a story and you brought up Shirley Temple, and I was like, oh, I met her as a child. And so that's one of my fun childhood memories.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love how in childhood, like these weird little things, like somebody putting a hose down, not for the purpose of being a hose and shooting water, but like being a rope that you could climb. I mean, it's those sort of the thing. As a kid, it's like, as an adult, we might analyze that and be like, well, was that safe? And but as a little kid, you're like, it's a hose, we can climb up it.
Yeah,
it's like,
it
it's
works.
the best thing ever. A climbing hose. Yes. Score. Yeah. I mean, this all sort of came out of, for me, I was on Clubhouse, which is this new social media phenomenon, this app. Right. And I was listening to some financial podcast, like the usual topic is something about the stock market or whatever, but the hosts wanted to just engage everybody in a different topic at the beginning of the day to get everybody in a good mood. And so the topic that you could share about was what are the toys you played with when you were a kid? Like, what are the board games, or what are the dolls, or the toy trucks, or play sets or whatever. And just like, it just so happened that I'm in Gen X. I was born in 1970. Like, there was just almost everyone in the room was in my age range. So every time somebody mentioned a toy they played with, I either played with it myself, or my sister had it, or one of my best friends had it, and I had this like amazing happy memory of it. Somebody would say Light Bright, and we'd be like, oh my god, everyone in the room would be like, oh my god, Light Bright was so cool. People would say Etch a Sketch, like I had an Etch a Sketch, and people were like, oh my god, I got playing with the Etch a Sketch for like 9 hours straight. I mean, there's people that I'm sure that I would never have like necessarily related to if we just started, kept talking about the stock market or whatever. And like all of a sudden we were like, it really transformed the whole virtual
bonding
into like a bunch of happy 5-year-old kids. And it was a work day. And I mean, it was a weekday, and I had like one of my best I was happy all day long from that, just because. And so, I have a lot of happy childhood memories. I feel very blessed. I mean, I had a lot of joy in my family when I was growing up. I feel very lucky. I grew up in a small town in Maine. It's like, it was called Berwick, Maine. It still is. I don't know why I said was. It didn't change into something else. But it was really like a sort of stereotypical, like beautiful small American town, like that you would just see in a like a really cheesy movie about a boy confronts his fears, and I mean, there was just so much. Like, the first thing is like where the lot that my parents had bought our house on when we moved in this house in 1972 when I was 2 years old. My sister had just been born, and the piece of land that this house was on was It was literally like out of a storybook. We had, I mean, first of all, it was huge. I don't remember how many acres, but it was like
Yeah.
2 acres maybe, which to a little kid is might as well
It's
be like
huge.
the
Yeah.
moon. I
It's a
mean, I just
park.
had
You had your own
endless
park.
space to just play and and
Mm.
this, and it was all like perfect
Was
ground
it
with
trees? What was
grass.
it like?
So we had everything. We had bushes, we had trees, we had just my dad had a
Clearing?
huge, massive garden every year where he
Mm.
grew everything under the sun. But there was literally, I'm not joking about this, there was an apple tree, a
Mm.
grapevine, a rhubarb patch, a blackberry patch, like a blackberry, gigantic
Yeah,
blackberry bush,
yeah.
gigantic raspberry bush, and then we had blueberry bushes all dotting the whole backside of our
Oh
lot.
my God.
My mom had a big, they used to call it a rock garden. It was like a flower garden with rocks in it.
Mm.
Um, and it was just like the most ideal, like, and to me, this is
Heaven.
the thing when you're growing up, it's like, you think everything is like that. It's like, oh yeah, I guess
Yeah,
everybody has all this stuff. And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
no one has all that, you know?
yeah.
But it was just so cool. And, I mean, my sister and I did so much fun stuff, on that patch of land. I mean, we used to pick
Yeah.
berries. We used to,
Yeah.
we used to play tag. We used to play kickball with our friends. Like, we used to
The
play.
berry patch reminds me because my grandmother lived in Lemon Grove and her
Okay.
home, she had like 3/4 of an acre and she lived on the canyon's edge and she had on the side of some building uh, berry bushes. They were blackberries and I would always
Mm.
go look. I would pick them.
Oh, were you not supposed to?
Well, because it wasn't a big, there wasn't like a jillion. So there were maybe
Ah,
like
okay.
5 or 10, whatever. And I'd keep watching. And then once they'd get ripe enough, I'd eat them. Well, of course, she was watching too. And she wanted them. And I would get to them before her. I didn't know this until later. So she was probably
That's
like,
hilarious.
yeah. So sorry, Nana.
Apologies to Nana for the
Yeah.
bad.
But I've never
Um,
seen a blueberry bush. What do they look
yes.
like?
So blueberry bushes are actually like a lot smaller and low to the ground. Like our
Okay.
our raspberry, I don't even know what you call the raspberry and blackberry bushes because those were like huge thickets. Like
Yeah.
it was, I don't know, probably somewhere between 3 and 5 feet tall,
Yeah.
and it would be maybe 3, 4 feet wide, and then like I don't even know, 50 feet long. So it was literally like this chunk
Wow.
of our land
Oh
was
my
taken up
God.
with the raspberry bush and the
Yeah.
blackberry bush. But blueberry bushes are more like they just sort of grow amongst other like bushes and weeds,
Yeah.
sort of at the
Okay.
edge of the woods. That's where
Okay.
our lot
Oh man, that would
had
be
the woods on the edge
so
of it.
cool because I love blueberries to actually pick.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've seen shrubs that they look like they're blueberries, but I don't think they're
Mhm.
edible. So I've never actually, I don't know that I've ever
Yeah, and the
seen a
cool thing
blueberry
was
bush.
like where I grew up in southern Maine, like there were farms that had way more, like it would be
Stuff.
like a
Yeah.
blueberry farm,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they would have this little wooden stand by the side of the road, and every summer they
Yeah.
would sell the
Oh,
blueberries.
I
So it
love
was a
stuff like
business,
that. Yeah.
and ours wasn't like that. Like
No.
we knew that there's plenty
Just
of places that people want to buy blueberries, so we
yeah.
would just eat them ourselves. My mom would make
Yeah.
blueberry muffins. There was
Ooh,
yeah.
fun.
I grew up loving rhubarb. Like rhubarb's one of my favorite things.
Oh, really? I
And
don't.
throughout the rest of my life, I know everybody's like rhubarb, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
It reminds me of an older person's food. I want
Yeah.
to say old lady's food because I'm like an old lady now. Probably that age that I thought at one time was
But
an old
rhubarb's
lady.
interesting too because it grows in these weird, like you have what's called a patch, which is it's just a little piece of ground, and they grow out as stalks, but they kind of like they collapse over on their own weight pretty quickly. So it's just like you have to have this little patch of land where there's just like these weird roots growing out, and then but then you can and you can eat it, and yeah, I mean it was really. It was, I mean, it's when I look back, I'm like, especially the age I'm at now, and
I know
I've
what
met
I
people that
mean.
grew up in Manhattan, that grew up in like
Oh, wow.
downtown
Yeah.
at Los
Yeah.
Angeles, and
Yeah.
it's a whole, like, you can have a great childhood in those places,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's so
It's
different,
different experience. What kind of grapes were they? Concord grapes? Do you remember? Did you know what
So
type
the
of
thing,
grape?
I didn't know if I was going to mention this, but the apple tree and the grapevine produced fruit, but there's something about like, they hadn't been maintained properly prior to us taking the land, so they were dying. So
Mm-hmm.
like we only had apples and grapes for my first few, like until I was like 5 or 6 years old, and we couldn't
Okay.
eat them.
Okay.
But there was still cool. I mean, to me, it was still cool. Like the
Yeah.
tree would still
Have
produce
it.
apples, and they'd be on the ground, and
Yeah. So one of my grandparents had alongside of their garage had this arbor, and so it was Concord grapes. And
Oh
so
wow.
in the
Well,
when
California, yeah.
yeah, so I guess in the but not Concord grapes. Like
Mm,
so they were Concord grapes and I'd go in there and it was just like oh my God. And so I ate growing up, I ate Concord grapes. I remember helping my grandfather make wine.
mm,
And so it here in California, I've never seen as adult Concord grapes. And so there
mm,
was a grocery store near my house in Claremont, and I went in there. It was called Keel's one summer shopping for. It was when I had my personal assistant client shopping for a client customer, and in this little package were Concord grapes, and I like almost lost my shit. I was like, oh my God. And they have a very distinct smell. And I remember going over there
mm.
and smelling them. And so every summer thereafter, I would go and buy them. And oh,
Yeah,
just thinking about it, I think of my grandparents. Like they were like they were acted as my parents. Cause anyways,
yeah.
so yeah, I
I
just
gotta,
love Concord grapes.
I gotta give love to my grandparents because another way I was extremely fortunate and lucky was that my mom was an only child, and then my dad had one younger brother, so we had a pretty small
Yeah.
family in terms
Yeah.
of the next generation up.
Mm-hmm.
And my four grandparents, had my mom and dad when they were, pretty young, like 19, 20 years old. So there were no generational gaps. So, and my dad's parents lived basically right down the street from us in
Oh,
Berwick.
nice.
So they were really close. And then my mom's parents on that side were about 30 to 35 minutes away from us by car. So and my grandparents lived. I had all four of them alive until it was the year that I moved to San Diego. It was 2013. I was 43
wow.
years old,
Wow.
which is and I mean, and they were healthy and active for the most part, right up
Nice.
until their passing.
Yes.
Most of them. I mean, I should say my dad's parents had some issues in the later years, but I mean they lived longer than the others.
Vibrant. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I just had most of my life. I had not only my parents in my life, my aunt and uncle, but also all four grandparents. And because you just mentioned like how tastes and smells, my
Yeah.
grandpa Worster, so my dad's dad, we used to go over to their house in Berwick during the school year, or we would go to their camp. Well, we call it a camp, a house on a lake, which was just again
Ooh.
idyllic, ridiculous.
Yeah,
We bought it for
nice.
$5,000 in 1946 or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his specialty was he would make pancakes for us with maple syrup and give us cranberry juice, which was just ocean spray. But he had this magic recipe for pancakes, and they were like the best pancakes on the planet every single time. It was like the best. And one thing that I mean, it's a funny memory is that my mom and my grandpa Worcester had this like ongoing conflict because my sister and I would come home and we would be like raving about the pancakes.
Yeah.
So my mom was like, "Well, I can make pancakes if that's what happens."
Sorry.
And she would make them, and we were like, "No."
You're right. Yeah.
And so my mom got frustrated, and she sort of like pressured my grandpa Worcester into giving her the recipe.
Yeah.
But as far as we know, like he gave her the wrong like he would not give it up. Like he
Yeah,
gave it to her, but it was not the right recipe.
Yeah.
So she made it thinking
Oh.
we would love the pancakes just as much as his, and we're like, nope. No. And she's like, you have to like them. These are the recipe. I think my grandpa Worcester was just like being a little gangster. He's like,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
do
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna.
That's funny. I think that happened to me in the sense of a friend had made some tequila shrimp and it was like cream based. It was divine. And I asked her for the recipe and made it. It was like, so I think she pulled some gangsta stuff on me too and didn't give me something because I was like,
sure,
it's not as creamy and luscious.
Well, it depends.
But you know what? I honestly think like your grandfather obviously loved you both. I
Yeah.
really believe that, like, when we do stuff with love and just
Yeah.
joy and appreciation, like that energy is infused in whatever, and we feel it. Like I see it on people's websites.
Yeah.
I can tell it in a story. I just, so it's everything's energy, right? So
Yeah.
there was probably, who knows if I love that, if your grandpa pulled some gangsta stuff or not. Just pulled one special ingredient out.
Yeah.
But yeah, because your mom's like, I gotta make, so her energy was like totally different.
I don't know how long. Yeah, I don't know how long it went on for, but it feels like it was like many
Yeah,
years of our
yeah,
early
that's
childhood. Of just like my
funny.
mom,
That
like,
is
I'll
funny.
get you, Grandpa.
So what's one of the things that you love to do as a kid? Like between like 5 and 10, what's something that comes to mind?
I mean, I just love to play. Like when we had that conversation in Clubhouse, I mean, it just brought back so many memories of my toys. And again, I feel like I was very lucky as a kid.
Which one? Like what one stands
I
out?
played, so Star Wars came out in '76. I was 6 years old. Like I had all sorts of, I had the Millennium Falcon. I had a whole bunch of action figures from the original films, and I used to make up my own Star Wars stories with them
Mm.
and just play for hours. I was really into Matchbox cars, which are these
Oh
little
yeah,
metal.
I bought you one for
I still
your
have them, I
birthday one
think.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. And um, I used to play, like, I used to do races with them, but it's interesting, like, because I went on later to,
Did you have the
I, was,
track? The I
I
know they
had
weren't
one
for
of those, yeah, the
match.
Tyco thing. Yeah, I had one of
Oh
those. That,
God, I
yeah.
played that as an adult with a friend, and oh my God, that stuff was so fun. Especially turn off the lights so when it's dark, and you
Oh,
get a little
I didn't have
spark
the glow in the
going.
dark one. Yeah, that was
No, it
cool.
wasn't glow in the dark,
Oh,
but when it come around the corners or something, sometimes it would spark,
yeah. Oh,
and
yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah. The
and that was like,
sparks.
oh, so cool.
It is funny. We talk about every now and then, like, talk about feeling a little older, like this. I mean, they had safety laws for toys back then, but they were not as sophisticated as today. And so, like, I don't think a toy that like generated actual sparks.
No, but it wasn't. It wasn't. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't
No, I know,
bad,
but
and it
today
never
it's like,
caused anything. Yeah,
yeah,
but it was just exciting because it would just be that
yeah,
flash.
yeah,
And if the lights were on, you wouldn't see it. It could happen during the day. You wouldn't even notice it because it was
yeah.
so like fast. But
But
that was always fun.
I got very young. I think probably 5 years old. I got a Lionel model train for Christmas, and which was a big deal. Because it was not just, a lot of toys were just sort of flimsy or plastic or whatever, and Lionel made these train sets. It really was something like kind of they'd done in the '40s and they just hadn't stopped doing it.
Wow.
But they were metal. I
Mm,
mean, almost completely
yeah.
metal. I mean, I guess they had some plastic parts, but like the wheels and everything were metal. The track was metal, and they came in different sizes, or what they call gauges.
Yeah.
Mine was like O gauge, which is one of the largest ones. So the cars were like a foot
Wow.
long
Oh,
and probably like 2 or 3 inches high.
oh my gosh.
And I had like 20 of them. And
Oh,
we set up the
what?
track. We set up the track in my attic in the house that I grew up in.
I don't have that
And I
here.
mean, I just
We have family
remember,
rooms.
what's that?
We have family rooms. We don't have attics here.
California.
So
I know.
yeah.
There's no attic and no basement in California. I
Or
didn't know that.
basements. Yeah. A lot of, yeah. A
I
whole
was like,
nother
where does
thing.
everybody put everything?
I know.
Um,
That's what I was thinking. Like, where do you have a special room for all
that's why
your toys?
the
Yeah.
public storage industry in California is like massive because nobody
Yeah.
has an attic or
Yeah.
a basement. But yeah, I just remember playing with that thing for
Oh,
forever.
wow.
And I also toys really helped my creativity because I remember
Mm.
I wrote a whole. It was so funny when that series came out on PBS about the train that's like a person, kind of like Tommy the Train or something.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Because I had done that in the early '70s. When
Ah!
I train, I would write stories about my train, and
Oh,
each car would be like I
a
personified it.
person.
So each
Ah,
so it's like
what?
the engine would have to I don't know what happened. The engine
Yeah,
would have
yeah,
to
yeah.
convince cars to come along
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
certain direction. But
Fun.
I
So
think that
creative.
yeah, like creativity has been a huge part of my life. And I think so much of that started in, fueling my
Childhood.
imagination
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
those sessions where I was playing. I remember doing the same thing at the lake house that my Worcester grandparents had,
Uh-huh.
where they had all these plastic boats and old
Mm.
metal Tonka trucks from the '50s or whatever.
Ah.
and I would just like make up stories. I would give each one of them a personality and a voice, and like I would have them have some sort of story unfold, like.
So that's kind of like what we have now in the movies, which is like the Power Rangers, and what's the cars that turn into
Oh,
robots?
Transformers. Yeah.
Transformers. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, it reminds me, I was walking around the block the other day with Nibbles, my granddaughter's dog, and there were four young girls out on the sidewalk, and they were playing, and there was one girl that was much smaller and younger, and she would jump on the other girl's back, and then they would try and get her to go on the other girl's back without her touching the ground. So she was like piggybacking onto each person. And then so it was like when she handed it off to the second person, the young girl's legs hit the ground, and they're like, okay, it's my turn. You got to start over. You lost. And I was walking by them and watching when they were freaking adorable. They're probably ranging from like 7 to 12. And I thought, yes, they're not inside on computers or what have yous. They're outside and they're using their imagination. And I was like thinking, right on, girlfriends.
That's one thing, though, I think. Oh, we weren't going to talk about this, but you just brought it up. I think
I triggered a memory. I didn't bring it up.
no, not a memory. I just like, because what's interesting to me, one of many things that's interesting to me about this concept of play and toys and all these things, is that each generation typically thinks that because toys and playing are affected by technology. And so each generation has a group of people in it that think that the technology advancements in the toys and play of their children's generation are less genuine or something, or less valuable than the ones they had. Like I remember people when I was a little kid saying, "Oh, you have a remote control car. Like we never had that. We didn't need a fancy machine." But like remote control cars were freaking amazing. Like
they still are.
And I think one thing that a lot of people in my generation, and I have massive empathy for parents everywhere. Parenting is like the most challenging thing on the planet. I get that. But I think, a lot of kids play a lot of video games right now. And there's this idea in our generation that like that's bad because we played outside a lot. And I think what people don't see is that, the world has just changed. It's always changing. And the technology has gotten to the point where, those things are really super fun to play. And yes, do they have potential for, whatever, getting, like so that you never go outside and that sort of thing? Yes.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people are like, oh, I remember, like, because one of the things I think back on and I'm like, I'm blown away by this is that I remember playing outside a lot. I also remember playing inside a lot.
Yeah.
And I also, when we were, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old, we got an Atari 2600, which was like one of the first video games.
Yeah.
And I remember playing Pac-Man on the Atari 2600.
I love Pac-Man.
Like for an entire Saturday, to the extent that I couldn't move my thumb for 2 days. I pretty much stopped playing video games when I was in high schoolish. But I played so many video games. It's ridiculous. Like I don't even want to know the number of hours I spent like with like these, what we had, these little colored dots moving around.
Yeah.
So amazing. Today we have like 3D people like
I know, it's amazing. Is that real? Is that human?
I'm all with you. I think that playing outside is good, like getting outside in nature is good. But I also feel like there's like I hear people my age and older kind of vilifying video games.
Yeah, and no, I hear what you're saying, and thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. I think both are really valid and important. And
I agree.
It was just really nice to see, because it's not something that I see and hear often.
Yeah.
And I actually had a firsthand experience with it, and it made me happy.
Yeah. I think what people are concerned about, and this is valid to me, this is valid, I agree with this, is that what you don't want anyone to have, like as an adult, I have concerns about this for myself. I watch a lot of YouTube. I'm trying to reduce it a little bit. Because I think the concern is you want people to be active. You want people to be either physically active or active in your imagination, like using your mind in a more proactive way. What you don't want what most people feel like is not really good for us if we're spending a large percentage of our days just having something wash over us where we have no role.
Yeah.
Because I think there's sort of this natural understanding, like we're put on this earth to do stuff,
Yeah.
and
Our
rest.
bodies are meant to work,
Right.
not work, excuse me. Our bodies are meant to move.
Yeah, move.
They're meant to move. So I want to get back to childhood memories. One of the things with my stepsisters, I remember, because it was funny because we were all like a year behind each other. So we, and somehow, I don't know where we got this. I believe it was my bike. It was blue. It was navy blue. And it was what we'd call today a beach cruiser. And I had a bell. I loved it. And because I think there were 3 or 4 of us girls playing with it all the time, like it ended up getting beat the F up. Like I remember we were down the street at a neighbor's, riding the bike on the sidewalk, but they had a brick wall. And so one of us, we were all trying to learn how to ride, I guess, because we didn't know how to ride, or some of us didn't know how. And we scraped the pedal up against the brick wall. And so it eventually got torn. It just, the bike, like I think it had a short-term life. But I just remember having such a great time riding that bike. I loved it. And so I think it's been 13 years now. I was doing some visioning work and it was like, what do I want? And I was like, oh, I want a bike. I want a bike like that. I loved riding my bike because I had like a 10-speed as an adult. I didn't really like a mountain bike. That's what I had, a mountain bike. I didn't really like it that much. I rode it. And so I bought myself this amazing bike, and it's blue, white, two-tone. It's got a basket and a bell that says I love my bike. And I've been riding it since 2008, and now we're in 2021. And my inner child loves it. Like I'll be riding, oh my God, I get done. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
I feel free. And so yeah. I think it's important to think about like, what did we do as kids, talk about that. And then as adults, we get so serious. I don't know when that changes. I think sometimes when we get into school,
I think
our
it's
focus
different
starts
for a lot
to
of
shift.
people.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being really jealous of my cousin, my one and only first cousin, because my family let him not have a summer job for a long time, like all the way up through like senior high school. And like when I turned 13, my family was like, you need to get a summer job. And I worked all summer, every summer for the rest of my life. My first job was for Grandpa Worster. Like he owned some apartment buildings in Berwick. And so I helped him by mowing the lawns every week.
Oh,
and he would pay me like $5 or whatever it was, $10.
I didn't know that.
And then I ended up, my uncle actually lived in Acton, Maine, which is a little further up. And he had this gigantic plot of land that had massive lawns that I ended up. So I started out mowing lawns. Then I worked at McDonald's one summer.
Oh, wow. I
started working at a minor league ballpark selling hot dogs and Coke in the stands.
Oh, how'd you like that job, being around the baseball?
That was the absolute best. It was the absolute best. It was this weird time in the history of the area that I grew up in. We had this AAA ballpark, which is one level below the major leagues.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it started out as the Cleveland Indians AAA team.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like a 3,500 seat baseball stadium, and it was amazing. And it's so funny because everybody thought I was this shy kid and like very intellectual and a good student and all that, but I was very quiet, shy, withdrawn. Yeah. And this job required you to be like, hot dogs hit, peanuts hit, And I just like I just got into it, and I think it just sort of shows like if you love something, you expand as a person, and I think that's we got to wrap up pretty soon here, but I think
we do. Oh my God,
we do. We got a late start today, so. One of the things that I've noticed, and still to this day, the song "Puff the Magic Dragon."
I love Puff the Magic Dragon.
Makes me so sad. Like it makes me so sad. Like I can't listen to it.
Why?
Because Johnny Paper, the main character in the song, decides that he's never gonna visit his toys again at a certain point. And by the end of the song, Puff the Magic Dragon is alone and he's sad, and you sort of know he's gonna die, like alone and depressed. It's like I don't know why people love that song. It's like one of the most depressing
Well,
songs.
most of the nursery songs are like really like
I know,
when you
but
hear the
everybody's like,
history
"Oh, I
of
love
them,
that
they're
song,"
like,
and I was like, "Have you listened to the lyrics? It's about
because we didn't know. They just sang them and they were happy and they were
Puff
happy
the
songs.
magic dragon
Yeah.
healed himself from depression.
Ring around the roses. Talk about it's like, oh, we know what that's really about. It's like,
But I used to when my parents played that for me, I would just get I would start bawling like at an insane level because I think I got it that our culture, our civilization has that idea that's in that song. And I don't mean that we shouldn't transition from childhood to adulthood. That we have to do.
Yeah.
I don't mean that your responsibilities aren't going to shift. Like I just said, like I used to hear, like my typical day as a kid was like playing outside a lot, playing indoors a lot, watching a buttload of TV, and playing a bunch of Atari. Because I had no responsibilities. Like my parents were taking care of everything. You know.
Yeah.
Today I got so many things to do. I don't want to think about it. But
play's important. We need that. We're still have that inner child.
That's why that song makes me so sad. Is it I think all it's really talking about is like, you know, part of life is transitioning from childhood to adulthood. But again, the sad way that it ends kind of makes it seem like what a lot of people I think, which is when you graduate from whatever, 6th grade, or, you know, middle school or high school or whatever it is for you, you're done with play. The rest of your life, or play is, you know, it has to be adult play that has a serious element to it, like golf, like,
or it's an extravagance and not a necessity.
Yeah, luxury. Yeah. Like, well, someday if I save up enough, I'll go on vacation. I'll play tennis in Florida or something. And it's like,
that's what I always like tell clients. I ask the clients, what did you like to do? Because so many people come to me and they're not having fun. They're not happy.
Yeah.
And all my questions like, what did you like to do when you were a little kid?
Yeah.
And I always love hearing, and I'm like, are you doing that? When was the last time you did it? Or some semblance of it.
Yeah.
And it's really wonderful. So it's and we're not taught that. Like we're not taught so many things. Many of us are not taught like how to live a healthy, happy life.
Yeah.
And part of that is like being in touch with our inner child and making time for play. Play's important. We're taught how to work, you know, got to work, but we're not taught the importance of play. And it's like, how do you you know, be a healthy, happy, whole person? Is play is important. That's why, you know.
And so I feel
like we can have a part 2 of this because I didn't feel like we really got into like jump rope, Chinese, jacks, and Susie Bake Oven. I got a whole story on Susie Bake Oven and dodgeball, volleyball at school.
So much of it is
tetherball.
Mindset and the beliefs that get kind of programmed into us as children. Because I remember seeing a documentary, I think it's called Rich Kids, which is they focus on like a bunch of like children from wildly financially successful families, you know, empires that, you know, And I remember one of the guys, you know, who's probably in his 30s or 40s, when they interview him, he's the heir to, I want to say, the Johnson & Johnson fortune or something like that. So, I mean, he's had hundreds of millions of dollars his entire life. Never had to work a day in his life. And all he gets when he thinks about what to do, all he does is think about what he would like to do and things that make him happy. And that's not the whole story, but it's part of it. And I know as soon as I say that, my brain and everybody else's brain that's listening and watching is like, well, easy for him. He's super rich. But the reality is like, I think, especially in like middle class, working class America, that's my wheelhouse. I don't know much about other countries because I haven't lived there. But in working class and middle class America, I think a lot of us just get brought up with this idea that like, once you get past a certain age, whether it's 16 or 18 or 21 or whatever, there's a danger in play. There's a danger in doing things that aren't for money, because it's like, well, what if you do them too much and you don't pay your bills and you're not a responsible member of society? And there's just, I never understand this idea of like, we have 24 hours in every day, 7 days in every week. Yes, you know, time management's complicated for all of us. I'm like the poster child for time management issues, but I think like there's an abundance of time if we really get quiet and really tune into the universe. And I think like there's time for you to go to your job, do your work, be in your relationships, and and by the way, you can have fun and play with other people too. And there's also time for play. There's time for you to, whatever that is for you. And maybe it is golf. Maybe you have changed and, playing checkers with somebody, which you loved when you're 4, you don't care about it anymore. Maybe golf is like your most fun thing. But then there's, I talk to so many people who it's like they've almost made a decision not to have fun. And like there's this nobility to it. Like, because they're presenting like their resume to me is like, I'm somebody who's serious. I'm somebody who works really hard. We need to do a whole episode on the whole work hard thing.
Well, and I wrote down, I just think, I don't know who created it. It had to have been some business owner. The 5-day work week. Like what?
Oh, yeah.
Like that is so lopsided. Like 3-4. I'll work 3 and off 4. Like, come on.
No, there's a great book called The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. It was like the book that got him famous. He's now been a TV host and written a whole bunch of other books and things. But I read that book and it really blew my mind, not because of the main point of the book, which is him trying to suggest this alternate way of life that doesn't really work for me. But, in there, he just was so clear that the 5 days a week of work with 1 or 2 weeks of vacation until you're at the company for 10 years.
Yeah.
And, 2 days off and then every now and then a Monday. Yeah. Like that's something from literally hundreds of years ago back in Europe when the industrial era just started. Like they had, hours for shifts and then slowly got translated into what we have today. And it's ridiculous. Like most people at their regular day jobs understand that there are some jobs where you need to be there for a certain number of hours because of certain things about the industry or whatever. Yeah. But so many jobs are like, it's really just like, do you get the work done every day? And it's like, it doesn't have to be 8 hours a day. It doesn't have to be 40 hours a week. It could be 20 or 30 or whatever. So anyway, that's a whole other, the whole work hard thing. And that is a whole other topic. But I think the big message I would want people to come away from this episode is like, so many people are unhappy. And like, there's this basic, obvious question. They're like, are you doing anything that makes you happy? Like, what makes you happy. Like, we know what makes us happy.
Okay. So I'm going to end with one of my favorite things to do as a kid was to play music I like and dance. I would do it in the evening in our living room and just dance my butt off. Yeah. What about you?
Absolutely. My grandpa Susie, my other grandfather, had a disco in Scarborough, Maine called the Rainbow Disco from 1977 and like 1981, something like that. And my whole family worked in it on the weekends. And so I was in a disco like every weekend from when I was 7 years old till when I was like 11.
Wow. Freaking awesome. That's great.
Dancing is just bliss for me.
So we invite you, if you've listened to this podcast and made it all the way through, invite you. Yes. And we thank you. We invite you to think about, what did you like to do as a kid? What have you not done in a while that you love? And then make plans this coming week, within the next 2 weeks, to do something that you love, that your little kid's like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And again, it has these two effects, right? That'll make you feel good, which is the whole point of life pretty much. And, but it'll also help you attract more good stuff into your life. Like if you're really frustrated that you haven't gotten that job that you want or that car that you want or something like that, the way to do that is not to get more frustrated over not having it. The way to do it or the easiest and smoothest way is to just do things that make you feel good.
Yeah. And that's why you want to go on that $3,000 vacation, because you want to feel good and have fun. It's like when you can take 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour this week and do something that makes your heart happy. Yeah. Oftentimes it doesn't take a lot of money.
I think we should
do time and attention.
I think we should do a part 2 on this. I don't know if do we have a guest next week? No. It's just us. We'll do another part. We'll do part 2 on childhood stuff. But this was really great. I enjoyed this discussion. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of our episode today. And thank you so much if you listened to us on the audio version.
Thank you.
Thank you so much if you watched us on YouTube. Please do like us on YouTube and subscribe to us there, and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a rating if you want to. We would really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot.
Thank you.
If people want to find you, Stephanie, so they can work with you, where would
www.powerinjoy.com.
And you can always find me at my website, Collin Worster, Worster, same as Grandpa Worster's last name.com. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening or watching.
Yes, thank you.
We love you all. We've been seeing the views and the listens go up and up and up every week, and we are humbled and grateful to you. And we're excited about continuing this season of the podcast. So we'll see you next week on Co-Creation Station.
Bye,
Bye, everybody.